Hello everyone, welcome to Lies. Y'all know the drill. This is the bit where I get to confess to all the mistakes we made, own up to the liberties we took, and tell all the awesome stories that we just couldn't fit into the episodes. So let's get to it. This was our shortest series, so this will probably be our shortest Lies, but there are a few things I really need to cover. First, the question of the map. This is a bit nitpicky and doesn't really change the history, but there's some debate over when Jon Snow made his famous map. The only accidental copy we have is the one he submitted with his report the month after the epidemic was over. Linguistically, I tried to avoid saying absolutely that he had a map during the events, but I'm pretty firmly on the side that he sketched out the map to figure out what was going on and then just made a more polished version to submit with his report. Otherwise, I just can't see him doing all this, much less convincing the health board that this is what was going on. But it is an open question as to when exactly he penned the map. On to a much graver topic. Throughout the episodes, I talk about them defeating the demon cholera. I thought about phrasing it as, they gave us the tools to defeat cholera, but I didn't because I wanted to talk about it here. Cholera still affects millions of people in developing countries. Tens of thousands of people a year die from cholera. I mean, it's this disease which most of us watching these videos are protected from by things we don't even think about. And I mean, I think humanity is this amazing thing. I think it's incredible how far we've come and what we've done. But sometimes it still shocks me that for all the marvels of the modern world, simple things we have the know-how and capacity to beat, still take tens of thousands of lives a year and still cause just incredible suffering. And many people expressed incredulity that this was ever a problem, right? Comments were filled with people asking, didn't people know better than to drink water contaminated with human waste? And it seems like something we'd all be shocked at, but the truth is, if you're getting your water from a river or a well, it's actually pretty hard to tell if it's contaminated. I mean, we're talking about the seepage of microbes. We're talking about waste that's diluted by the flow of an entire river. But today we know this is a problem. And the more I researched the topic, the more it stood as a shocking reminder of how non-universal even some of our older triumphs of medicine and science are today. But anyway, this leads me back to the episode. Remember how we talked about the fact that all this waste is diluted by the massive flow of the Thames? Well, that's actually why so many people dismiss the possibility of the disease being in the water. The germ theory of disease didn't have observational backing yet, right? It wasn't accepted. But educated people of the era, especially in the field of medicine, were eminently familiar with chemistry, right? We're in that period of history. And so many of them, even if they weren't hardcore miasmatists, conceptualized disease more like a chemical poison, which of course made the idea that the disease was spread through the Thames water ridiculous, because any poison, even the strongest known to man, would be instantly diluted to the point of being harmless by the vast outflow of the river. What they didn't have was this idea that a disease could be self-replicating, that even the smallest sample, unlike a chemical, could reproduce in the body to the point where it could be something deadly. This is something which seems so intuitive to us with our modern understanding of the world, but when you try and sort of put yourself back in the minds of the day, this is one of those great conceptual leaps. And it always makes me wonder, it makes me think about what basic conceptual underpinnings of the world that we haven't found yet that people will take totally as given in 100 years. And that reminds me, a lot of people in the comments seem to think that Louis Pasteur invented the germ theory of disease, and so here it was sort of an anachronism. But it's actually been around in one form or another since the 17th, 16th century with a guy named Girolamo Fracastoro, I think. Go look it up because I'm sure I butchered that. And so though Pasteur absolutely deserves credit for proving beyond a doubt that the germ theory of disease was a real thing, and thus in many ways ushering in the era of modern medicine, he wasn't the very first person to have thought down these lines. maybe one day he should get an extra history episode. I mean, he certainly deserves it. Oh, another thing that many of you asked was why so many people resisted Snow's discoveries despite what seems like such clear evidence to us. And I mean, I can't really answer that question. Humans are funny things. We like to think of ourselves as rational, but sometimes people deny things that are so clearly and demonstrably true for profit. Sometimes they deny things because otherwise we would invalidate most of what they've done in their whole lives, or because it would simply make so much of what they've put their time into wrong. I mean, sometimes it's pride. And sometimes it's simply the horror of having to face what it would mean if you accepted this new truth. Imagine if you were a doctor back then, and I mean truly a good person, and you spent your life healing people, trying to make them better. Imagine how hard it would be to face the reality of what you've been doing, sort of bleeding and leeching people. I mean, imagine admitting you've been making people worse, you've been killing them. I can see how some people might not be able to look that in the eye. But on a less somber note, one pattern I've seen with history is that truth does win. I mean, that it may take time, and that time may have an impossible cost in lives, suffering, but in the end, evidence and truth wins out as generations pass. It's hard sometimes in our short lifetimes to see it. 5 years feels like forever, 40 feels like a lifetime. But one of the things I like about studying history is this constant march forward, at least from the fall of Rome, that shows us that all of our struggles that may seem so futile, that make us feel like just throwing our hands up in the air and saying, nothing ever gets done, why should I try? They really do matter. I mean, imagine how Jon Snow must have felt. He didn't even live to see himself vindicated. At every turn, he was met by people who dismissed him, no matter how clearly right he was. And yet today, if we give him the foundation of epidemiology, a little bit of sanitation movement, some tiny credit towards germ theory of disease, his works led towards the salvation of millions of lives. And now, today, almost all of us think like Jon Snow. We have the same conceptualization of the world. We believe him to be right. And so in studying history, it just always reminds me that the fight is worth it. And there are some days that I need that. But I've been way too dour for something as awesome as Jon Snow. So let's just have fun with the rest of this, because there are so many ridiculous things here. For example, and I feel terrible about cracking up at this because I know it was dangerous, I know it was awful, but you know how we talked about the cesspit under the house? Well, that was a really common thing at the time. And you know what cesspits generate? Methane. And you know what you have a lot of before electric lighting? Fire. And so periodically in London, people's cesspits would just explode. And so now you not only have poop in the streets, but exploding cesspits. And it still took a while for people to get behind the idea of sewers. Speaking of which, I have to give a shout out to Joseph Bazalgette, the lead engineer on the whole London sewer system. This guy was awesome. Not only was he meticulous and hands-on, but he was really forward-thinking. He had the foresight to realize that this was the only time they were ever going to rip up London to do this, so we'd better get it right for at least the next 200 years. So after making careful calculations of the sewage output of the city at its present size, which is something that I always crack up a little imagining him trying to do, because without modern sewage, without automatic measuring, how do you find out the average sewage output of a household? Other than going to door, knocking, and asking. Anyway, after doing the calculations, he demanded that the future-proof the system by using pipes that were a multiple of the size that the calculation showed the city needed. And that's why London is still using that sewer system. If they had gone with the original plans, the sewers would have overflowed in the 60s. Oh, and since I'm talking about sewers and the history of sewers, I really want to talk about the Roman Cloaca Maxima. The Cloaca Maxima is the famous great sewer of ancient Rome. It's part of why Rome could grow to the size it did. And it's a marvel of engineering. And basically the Romans were trying to drain some swamps, and they just covered the outflow of those and turned it into the sewers. And then they connected it to the public latrines and the baths to remove the non-potable water and the waste. And that was their sewer system. But the thing to remember about the Cloaca Maxima unlike modern sewer systems, is that most homes were not connected to it. There's all sorts of Roman laws about throwing your waste out the window. In fact, so many, it's kind of horrifying to think about how many people in ancient Rome must have been hit by flying human waste. But anyway, point is, there was never this massive public works project to try and connect the ever-changing hodgepodge that was Rome to the sewers. So while actually several ancient cultures built sort of incredible sanitation systems more than 2,000 years ago, with the Cloaca Maxima being the epitome of that, we only get the first true comprehensive sanitation system with the sanitation movement in the 19th century. And that leads me to Chicago, because a number of people want to know how you lift a city. I'll put the Wikipedia link below because it's so just unbelievable. But the raising of Chicago, to answer your question on how you raise a city, I mean, seriously, the answer, I kid you not, is on jacks. Yep, they just put jacks under the buildings, jacked them up, put in a new foundation and a sewer system, called it a day. I was trying to think about us doing something like that today. Can you imagine the downtown of your city just hanging out, sitting a few feet up in the air on jacks with the businesses still open? But anyway, I think before I go, I probably should apologize for pronunciation. I'm sure there's all sorts of British pronunciation we got wrong, like if I could pronounce pronouncing. Southwark, like Southwark, like Americans, instead of Southwark, which it is. And I'm sure even in this live video, I butchered a ton of pronunciation, so forgive us on pronunciation. But on the plus side, I don't think we had any flags to get wrong this time around. And speaking of my homeland, America, you know what we thought caused cholera? The Irish. Kid you not. And on a totally random note, since I finally actually have the time to tell my anecdotes, do you know Jon Snow is an ardent member of the temperance movement? And maybe you did, right? If you looked him up, you probably did. But do you know he was also, for a while, a vegetarian? And it's hilarious to me because apparently he confused just all the cooks. In the 19th century in England, they couldn't understand the idea of not eating meat. So there's all these stories of him struggling as much to convince people that no, he really didn't want a steak as he did to convince them that yes, disease really could be transmitted but through water. But all right, I'll stop. Cause it Walpole time. The easy go-to here is Spencer Horatio Walpole, who was the Home Secretary during the outbreak, and much of the communication that was about the causes and what had to be done went through him. But that's too easy. So we could go with the fact that the whole private pumping station pumping water into London thing happened while Walpole was Prime Minister. But it wouldn't be a Walpole fact without him stealing something. So, remember how Jon Snow appealed to the Public Board of Health? And that Board of Health was established under the Public Health Act of 1848 by Prime Minister John Russell. Well, John Russell was from an old British family which had held many peerages, and one of his extended clan was Edward Russell, the first Earl of Orford, back in the 1700s. After the first Earl of Orford passed away with no heir, guess who got it given to himself? Robert Walpole. Yoink! Anyway, Walpole in 3. Actually, I guess 1 and 1 and 3, because that's what you get when you're in England only a century out from him. But it's time to wrap it up. As this goes live, so too should be the fabulous Sherlock Holmesy music by the Kiners. It's great. If you like the ending music to this episode, you should take a listen. And if any of you are wondering, after this, that was good, like, bait and switch there. After this, we're doing a couple of episodes because we do everything in 6-episode blocks. So we're doing a couple of episodes on Mary Seacole because, you know, cholera and cholera, they fit together. Then we're taking a break. And then we are finally going to get to finish the Justinian episodes, which I am super excited for. So thank you everybody on Patreon who voted for Justinian both times to allow me to finish that story, because it's one I've really wanted to finish ever since that last episode came to an end. And I hope you guys are all as excited for getting back to Constantinople as I am. Have a happy Feast of Sol Invictus, everyone. I will see you in a few weeks. Take care.